First, I want to come to you as someone who loves the church.
I was raised up in the faith by my local church.
I was raised strict, independent, fundamental Baptist.
Grew up at church camp in my teens.
I was a Republican voter for much of my adult life.
I'm a Christian, but I'm also a legislator.
All of us here are coming from different standpoints, different vantage points of our experiences.
And we have to make room for opinions and positions that we might personally reject, but should have a hearing in a true democracy.
It's part of a recent Zoom event for the group Evangelicals for Harris, with members explaining their enthusiasm for the vice president's candidacy. Our next guest is among a growing number of people in the evangelical community voicing support for the Democratic ticket. And joining us now, evangelical pastor Doug Pagitt. He is the executive director of Vote Common Good, an organization that mobilizes Christian voters. Pastor Pagitt, great to have you with us this morning. I want to read from a piece you wrote for MSNBC.com titled, "How I've Been Convincing Christians They Don't Have to Vote Republican." In it, you write this, quote, "On the trail in 2020, 2022, and this year, I've gleaned the reason many evangelical and Christian voters ultimately leave Trump, his obvious lack of kindness. A poll that my organization, Vote Common Good, commissioned in 2020 showed in swing states, Trump's lack of kindness was driving evangelical and Catholic voters away in large enough numbers to potentially affect the outcome of the election. Biden did better than Hillary Clinton did with evangelical voters. And if we come together and don't leave these folks to Trump, I think it's possible for Harris to receive the highest level of evangelical support since Jimmy Carter got roughly half the evangelical vote in 1976. And if that were to happen, it would break the back of the MAGA movement." So, Pastor, I'll let you explain a little bit more about what you're seeing and hearing out there on the trail and this phenomenon that we've been talking about for almost a decade now, where some evangelicals say, you know, we're not voting for a saint, we're voting for a president, somebody who will carry out what we hope he'll carry out. And in some cases, he did that, appointing those 3 Supreme Court justices. Are you seeing cracks in that argument now?
Yeah, Willie, actually, we've been seeing those cracks since just after Donald Trump's election in 2016. You know, he received nearly 81% of white evangelical support in 2016. But that went up from the summer of 2016, when in July he was down in the 30% range with evangelicals. But then he picked Mike Pence. Mike Pence became a validator, and then he promised to put evangelicals in his cabinet, which he then did. And evangelicals rallied around Donald Trump. And almost immediately after that election, many of them regretted that decision and started to rethink their commitment to Donald Trump. And so our group, Vote Common Good, along with a lot of other groups, started to organize. And in 2018, we launched a bus tour. And that bus tour ran in 2018, 2020, 2022, and is on the road again this year. And we're talking to evangelical voters, many of who have already had their minds changed. You know, a lot of people ask us, how do you go out and change the minds of these evangelicals? And the truth of it is, we don't feel like we have to change their minds. Their minds have already started changing. I mean, to be blunt, Donald Trump is like a self-cleaning oven who does all the work for you if you want to know who he's going to be and how he's going to perform as president. And for a lot of these voters, they're just not comfortable supporting him any longer. And we know that Donald Trump may still receive 70% or 72% of evangelical support, which to someone like me seems entirely too high. But he can't win the swing states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, even Arizona, if he doesn't receive near 80% of evangelical support from white evangelical voters.
Now, you know, Pastor, I've been in politics one way or the other for the past 30 years or so. And I always found people respectful. And I will say even, and I've said it on the air too, that most Trump supporters are respectful when walking through airports or going to baseball games. But a lot of times, you know, there are a few that aren't. And I always tell this story because it's so shocking, because I grew up in the Baptist church. I grew up in the Baptist church in, you know, Chamblee, Georgia, in Meridian, Mississippi, mainly in Pensacola, Florida. And a lot of my friends, I'll be honest with you, that I grew up with, that I went to church with 3 times a week, 4 times a week, that did Vacation Bible School with, that I went to Ridgecrest with. I could go on and on. I do not recognize now. And I always tell this story, and Tim Alberta had basically the same story, but I was saying goodbye to my mom at her funeral, and her casket was 2 feet behind me. And somebody I grew up with in church who knew my mom and knew my family, instead of giving me condolences, came up to me and said, I am so concerned you're going to hell because you're not supporting. And I cut her off. I said, if you're about to say, because I'm not supporting Donald Trump, I want you to know I'm going to pray to Jesus tonight that he will forgive you and that you'll find your way, because you were so lost. You were so lost to be doing that at this moment. So I tell you that Tim Alberta's told these stories for people that grew up in the church. I want to know, because I still don't know what has happened to my friends. It's not about politics. This is not about issues. This is about substituting the gospel of Jesus Christ for a failed reality TV talk show host. I just don't understand it. Please explain.
Yeah, Joe, well, I'm an avid watcher of the show, so I feel like I've followed your tales of your religious journey, and it's very similar to other people's experiences. Look, for a lot of people, their religious identity and their political identity came as a package deal. And they think that deepening into their faith means deepening into their political identity. But just enough people, 5 to 15% of these evangelicals, especially in the swing states where it really matters, want to separate those two identities because they've seen the very same thing you've described. We've all seen it. We wonder what's happened to these people. I've been a pastor for my entire adult life, and I've seen it with people who've been part of my church. And I wonder what has happened to them. But I also know that there's a whole other group of people who've moved the other direction. They've deepened into their faith and separated their political identity from their religious identity. And those are the people that we can focus in the next 62 days to invite them to consider voting for a Democrat. Here's what you probably know to be true, Joe. A lot of these people have never met a Democrat, not a politician, maybe not even a Democratic voter. They literally don't know these people, and they've been told all kinds of lies about them. And once you introduce them to a person of faith like myself and other people who travel with us, we travel in a big bus that says faith, hope, and love, supporting democracy on Election Day. And that's the kind of thing that people come up and they feel confused, right? They see faith, hope, and love, and they know that's evangelical talk. But then they see supporting democracy for all on Election Day, and they think, well, that's not how we Republicans speak about this. Right. And some people are turned off, but so many people are saying, thank you for finally speaking out. Because when the 70% are screaming loudly, that other 30% need to also stand up. And frankly, a lot of evangelicals just get really quiet if they're not going to support Donald Trump, because the things you've described, well, I'll tell you, I get them too. I was on Fox News the other day, and my email box is full of people with the same reminders about, what they consider to be my ultimate outcome. So this is real in people's lives. And we want to do everything we can to encourage people to find what we call exceptional candidates. And we mean this, the kind of candidate that they would make an exception for. They might say, I would never vote for a Democrat, but I just might vote, for that Rebecca Cook in Wisconsin. I just might vote for the candidate this time who has a D beside their name. And we think Kamala Harris has the possibility to make that big shift. And if she can pull 25 or 30% of white evangelicals in the swing states, Donald Trump not only can't win, the MAGA movement doesn't have a future.
Yeah, and for those people out there that are watching that are thinking, oh, well, this is only talk of left-wing, pastors, radical priests, none other than Tim Keller, near the end of his life, said, I no longer call myself an evangelical because that's now more of a political identifier than an identifier of my faith. Executive Director of Vote Common Good, Pastor Doug Pagitt, thank you so much for being with us. We greatly appreciate it. Come back.
Thanks for having me.
And his opinion piece, by the way, is available to read online now at msnbc.com. And still.